Hey YouTube world, horrors there's plenty. Thanks for stopping by to check out the video. Please don't forget to hit or smash that like button for me. So today we're going to discuss Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. The intro was a Versace commercial of Nimrod shooting his bow and arrow into the clouds. He was trying to attack heaven. If you look in the sky actually and you look at the constellation of Orion, the mighty hunter, that is said to be a personification of Nimrod. They say Nimrod earned his place among the stars in heaven. And if that is true, which I don't think it is, but if it is, in the last days, God's going to cast all the stars down anyway. So it won't even matter. But yes, that was a Versace commercial honoring Nimrod. A lot of the symbols and corporations that exist today, they are named after the gods, after the fallen angels, after the Nephilim, the Titans, the mighty ones, after Nimrod, after some type of secret society. It's all over the place. It's very pervasive. Once you know what you're looking at, you can see it, spot it, break it down and detail it to anybody else who want to learn it. So what's in store for today? So today we're going to discuss Nimrod, the first Grand Master Mason of the Freemasonic Lodge, after the flood in the post-Diluvian world. We're not talking about what happened before the flood during the days of Noah and when the fallen angels came down from Genesis 6. We're going to focus on what happened with Nimrod after the flood and the post-Diluvian world. We're going to also touch on some Masonic scholars and authors and their works as well, to show you that I'm not making this stuff up. So let's get to it. Let's begin with scripture. We're going to begin in Genesis chapter 11. And it says here, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." So they wanted to make a name for themselves. Verse 5. Hold on a second here. Verse 5. "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they might have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore it is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth." So it's a lot to even unpack there that a lot of people just don't see. And so verse 1, one language, one speech, and of course they were a one mind frame. So that's when the New World Order began. Everything was one, and God broke it up, and that's where we're headed today. They're trying to get everything back together, bring this unity back, unite all the nations, make everything back one. When you look in verse 3, they said, Let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. These were brick masons. And they used the 7 sacred sciences, geometry, to make the brick and start building the tower. And the mortar that they used, if you think about when you're graduating from high school or college or anything like that, you have your cap and gown. Where the cap that the tassel lays from, that's the mortar board. So when you graduate and you get a degree, you have a mortar board on top of your head. That's why you get a high school diploma, and you go to college, you get a bachelor's degree, you go again, you get a master's degree, you get a PhD degree. Everything is degrees because it's actually based on Freemasonry. A lot of people don't even know that. And that's more proof and more people to talk about that in some of my upcoming videos as well, to break it down even further for you guys. Now let's go on a little bit more. It said here that the Lord scattered them upon the face of the earth in verse 9. So this is chapter 11, and the Lord scattered them off the face of the earth in verse 9. So 11:9. And what these evil Luciferians did is they flipped it. And that's how we got 9/11. See, 9/11, what happened in New York City, the Empire State, all of that stuff has been a spiritual movement to recreate and reverse the confusion of what God did at the Tower of Babel. And let me show you something here. When you look at biblical numerics, I'm not sure if you guys can see this. It talks about the meaning of the number 11. It said the meaning of the number 11 is important in that it can symbolize disorder, chaos, and judgment. Coming after 10, the number 10, which symbolizes law and responsibility, 11 represents the opposite, which is the irresponsibility of breaking the law, which brings disorder and judgment. And then it goes on to say in Genesis 11, the men rebelled against God and built the Tower of Babel. And so that's why it's Genesis 11, 1 through 9, where it talks about the Tower of Babel being built, God coming down, confounding the languages, and scattering them. And the number 9 in biblical numerics, it means finality or divine judgment. So God judged the earth the same way he judged them at first with the flood, but he didn't want to destroy it again because he just did with the flood. So instead of destroying the earth again and wiping out all the people, he just scattered the languages, which caused them to move abroad the face of the earth and replenish it, which is the first thing he told them when they got off the boat, when the water receded. He said, replenish the earth. But instead, they didn't want to replenish the earth because they was following the dictates of Nimrod. And we're going to get to that as well. All right, let's go here. Josephus. Josephus was a Jewish historian and scholar, and he wrote about what happened at Babylon. So we're going to read a little bit of this as well. It says, now the sons of Noah were 3, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, born 100 years before the deluge or the flood. These first of all descended from the mountains into the plains, and fixed their habitation there, and persuaded others who were greatly afraid of the lower grounds on account of the flood, and so were very loath to come down from the highest place or from the higher places to venture to follow their examples. Now the plain in which they first dwelt was called Shinar. God also commanded them to send colonies abroad for the thorough peopling of the earth, that they might not raise sedition among themselves, but might cultivate a great part of the earth and enjoy its fruits after a plentiful manner. But they were so ill instructed that they did not obey God, for which reason they fell into calamities and were made sensible by experience of what sin they had been guilty. For when they flourished with a numerous youth, God admonished them again to send out colonies. But they, imagining the prosperity they enjoyed was not derived from the favor of God, but supposing that their own power was the proper cause of the plentiful condition they were in, did not obey him. Nay, they added to this their disobedience to the divine will, the suspicion that they were therefore ordered to send out separate colonies, that being divided asunder, they might the more easily be oppressed. So God told them to populate the earth, basically. And they were like, nope. And they stayed together in the cluster, in the group, and they started prospering and getting rich. And they did not say this is because of the favor of God. They said we are prospering and doing this under our own power and under our own might. And nope, we're not going to move out and repopulate the earth, because if we do, we're going to be divided, and God may oppress us even more. Now, where did the people get this idea from? They got it from Nimrod. Let's continue. And Josephus in part 2, he says, now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man, and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it was through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured their happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into constant dependence on his power. He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have in mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. So here you have Nimrod telling people, don't fear God, rely on me, I'm going to protect you guys. We're going to build a tower. So if God ever decides to flood the world again, it won't be able to drown us because we're going to be too high in the air. And I'm going to take vengeance on God if he ever do it again. And because he killed our forefathers. And so once in some later videos, when I start reading the book of Jubilees and Enoch and some other books, you're going to see Nimrod. He's standing at the top of the Tower of Babel, and he has his archers. They all shoot arrows into the sky because they was trying to kill God with bow and arrows. Imagine that. So that's why in the Versace commercial, you see Nimrod shooting an arrow into the sky, supposedly trying to kill God. Now let's read the last part. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. So you're a coward if you submit to God. That's what Nimrod was teaching. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains, nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built, that thereby its great height seemed, upon the view, to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar, made with bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. When God saw that they acted so madly, he did not resolve to destroy them utterly, since they were not grown wiser by the destruction of their former sinners. Talking about the people before the flood. They didn't grow wiser. You know what I mean? But he caused a tumult among them by producing in them diverse languages, and causing that, through the multitude of those languages, they should not be able to understand one another. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon, because of the confusion of that language which they readily understood before. For the Hebrews mean by the word Babel, confusion. The Sibyl also makes mention of this tower and the confusion of the language when she says thus: when all men were of one language, some of them built a high tower, as if they would thereby ascend up to heaven. But the gods sent storms of wind and overthrew the tower, and gave every one his own peculiar language. For this reason it was that the city was called Babylon. And that's what happened on the plains of Shinar. So God stopped Nimrod from doing what he was trying to do. He confounded the languages. He destroyed 1/3 of the people. He destroyed 1/3 of the tower. And we're going to cover that in another video. And he scattered them. And that's where the chaos and the confusion came in. Verse 9 of chapter 11 of the book of Genesis. And that's why they reversed it, 9/11. And so Nimrod, and we're going to get to Nimrod being the first Grand Master Mason. And that's what 9/11 was about. The Twin Towers was actually symbolic of the two pillars in Freemasonry. That's what the two pillars of Freemasonry represents, the Twin Towers, Boaz and Jachin. And you can call them the pillars of Tupacane, whatever you like. But those pillars came from the pre-flood world. That was the knowledge that the fallen angels had given to man, along with the 7 sciences. All that information was inscribed upon the towers. Inscribed on the pillars. And they survived the flood. And Cush and Nimrod and Hermes, they found this stuff. And that's how they was able to do what they was able to do, and the illicit knowledge from the pre-flood world was able to continue unabated. Now, let's get to here. I'm at a Freemasonic website. It's called Universal Codemasonry. And it says this. It's called The Legend of the Craft that we're reading, our historical accounts of Nimrod and Freemasonry. Here's what it says. The universal sentiment of the Masons of the present day is to confer upon Solomon, king of Israel, the honor of being their first Grand Master. But the legend of the craft had long before, though there was a tradition of the temple extent, bestowed, at least by implication, that the title upon Nimrod, the king of Babylon and Assyria. It had attributed the first organization of a fraternity of craftsmen to him, in saying that he gave a charge to the workmen whom he sent to assist the king of Nineveh in building his cities. That is to say, he framed for them a constitution, and in the words of the legend, this was the first time that ever Masons had any charge of his science. It was the first time that the craft was organized into a fraternity working under a constitution or body of laws, and as Nimrod was the autocratic maker of these laws, it results as a necessary consequence that their first legislator, legislating with dictatorial and unrestricted sovereign power, was also their first Grand Master. That's Legend of the Craft, saying Nimrod was the first Grand Master Mason. But see, since Nimrod was such a rebel against God, the Masons don't want that to be uncovered. So what they did was they say, nah, we can trace it back to King Solomon after the flood, not Nimrod. And they confer that stuff, the honor, upon King Solomon of being the first Grand Master. But actually, their first Grand Master was Nimrod, the rebel against God. All right, let's read some more. This is now more Masonic literature. It says the great Masonic author Albert Mackey expands on this allegorical story of how Nimrod is one of the founders of Masonry. The legend of the craft in the old constitutions refer to Nimrod as one of the founders of Masonry. Thus, in the York manuscript, we read, at the making of the Tower of Babel, there was a mason first much esteemed of, and the king of Babylon was called Nimrod, was a mason himself, and loved well by masons. Let's continue. Let's continue and read a little bit more about Nimrod. All right, now we're reading from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry and its Kindred Sciences. This also is by Albert Mackey. And if you guys know Albert Mackey, he's a high-ranking third degree Freemason, Masonic scholar, author, and researcher. Here's what Albert Mackey says in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, page 530. In the mythical relations of the old constitutions, which made up the legend of the craft, it is spoken of as the ancient birthplace of Masonry, where Nimrod, who was its builder, and we know Masons are called builders, was a mason and loved well the craft, employed 60,000 masons to build it, and gave them a charge that they should be true. And this, says the Harleian manuscript, was the first time that any mason had any charge of the craft. And the Cook manuscript thus repeats this story. And this same Nimrod began the Tower of Babylon, and he taught his workmen the craft of masonry. And he had with him many masons, more than 40,000, and he loved and cherished them well. And the Leaning Down manuscript, which is dated around 1660, it is said that Nimrod gave a charge to the masons that they should ordain the most wise and cunning man to be master of the king. So we have manuscripts, the Leaning Down manuscript, we have the Cook manuscript, we have the Harleian manuscript, and we have the another manuscript I read, I think the York manuscript. We have Albert Mackey and all these other Masons saying that Nimrod was their first Grand Master Mason after the flood. All right, let's look at some more. All right, The first Grand Master of the Masons was Nimrod. This is written by a gentleman by the name of B. Daniel. He wrote a book called The Symbols of Freemasonry. And it says this on page 26 of his book. The central role was given to the Tower of Babel. Regis manuscript cites King Nimrod, the builder of the famous tower, as the first and most excellent master. He it was, and not King Solomon, who gave Masons their first charge, their rules of conduct and professional code. Again, the Regis manuscript, this guy citing from that, it says Nimrod, not King Solomon, was the first and most excellent master. And it was he, Nimrod, who gave Masons their first charge, their rules of conduct, and professional code. This guy goes on to say more. It says because the Masons adopted a new view of their origin around 1700s because they were concerned with social respectability and had no desire to threaten the establishment, finally rejected the legend of the craft, which honored the Tower of Babel, a pagan edifice constructed in open defiance of heaven. So there it is. And this also was written by another researcher who wrote a book called The Symbols of Freemasonry. He said that Masons were concerned with social respectability and had no desire to threaten the establishment. So they rejected the legend of the craft that said that Nimrod was the first Mason, and they bestowed that honor upon King Solomon. But if you do any research and you trace it back, you can see that after the flood, Nimrod was the first Mason, the first Grand Master, most excellent master. He gave Masons their first charge, and he employed over 600, 700, some said 1,000 Masons. And the Masons were the ones using the sacred sciences, the 7 sciences, using geometry. They built the Tower of Babel in open defiance to God using geometry and other illicit knowledge that they learned from the fallen angels on the other side of the flood. This is from Masonic authors and researchers. I didn't make this stuff up. Now we're going to end with Gary Wayne, who's also another researcher and author. And this is from his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Great book. I have it. I have both books, part 1 and part 2. Here's what Gary Wayne says. Craft legends recorded Nimrod as the Mason who loved the spurious sciences, or the sciences. That's the 7 sacred sciences, guys. Nimrod was captivated with aggression stemming from his newly found power. He is celebrated as a great Mason who applied his trade as he pleased. Not only was Nimrod a great Mason, but also he was the Grand Master, the leader of the new cult. Nimrod, in fact, was the first Masonic Grand Master for the post-Diluvian world. That means after the flood. He was the Grand Master who paraded the post-Diluvian world into disaster. The Regis manuscript supports this notion that not Solomon, but Nimrod. The Regis manuscript supports this notion that not Solomon, but Nimrod was indeed the first excellent Grand Master of the post-Diluvian Masons. Because of all this illicit knowledge, Nimrod was regarded as the founder of the 7 sacred sciences by some craft legends, whereas what was more accurate was that Nimrod sponsored and partnered with Hermes, who led the renaissance of the post-Diluvian spurious sciences. Nimrod taught all Masonic signs and tokens and knowledge to distinguish his builders and their craft from the rest of mankind. He organized and fused the newly founded cult with the elite of society, forming a transgenerational secret society to which he provided a constitution complete with laws of their governing. Nimrod was therefore honored in craft legends for creating post-Diluvian masonry. In one quick stroke of diabolical genius, through his unprecedented state power and organization, Nimrod ruined the post-Diluvian society as well as all subsequent generations with all the terrible evils that caused the demise of the antediluvian epoch. So here we go. Nimrod, the mighty hunter. It goes on to say, Nimrod began to construct cities and ziggurats to consummate his credentials as a master mason, just as scripture accurately records Nimrod as the builder of many cities. His most noteworthy accomplishment was, of course, the infamous Tower of Babel. Even though scripture does not record specifically that Nimrod was responsible for the construction of Babel, in fact, other legends do. The legend of Nimrod confirms Nimrod utilized Babel for symbolic purposes for his idolatrous and pantheistic new religion. He constructed the tower with more than 1,000 masons already indoctrinated in the sciences, employing the project, according to Masonic legends, to teach its practical applications. Nimrod spent 53 years in the craft at Babel. This founding Masonic organization at Babel became known as the ultra-secret Great White Brotherhood, which later transferred to the famous priest at Heliopolis, Egypt, and which was then inherited by the Essenes. Nimrod's ancient White Brotherhood organization now rests within the confines of the super-secret Illuminati, who defiantly sport the Great White Brotherhood title. Boom! There it is. Nimrod, the first Grand Master Mason after the flood. Stay tuned, guys. I have more videos coming up, and we're going to continue to explore this topic. Nimrod, the mighty hunter and the leopard tamer. Also, when you see people in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry, and they're wearing like leopard print hats, coats, purses, dresses, or whatever, Nimrod was the tamer of the leopard. And so it's a symbol that these people have been initiated into the mystery religions. I'm not talking about the average everyday man or woman who wears this stuff. I'm talking about in Hollywood. When they go through these initiation rituals, they come out and walk the red carpet, or they attend movie premieres, or they shoot videos and things like that. You'll see them wearing leopard print. That lets you know, for those who know, who have been initiated, that they have been initiated into the mystery religions of Nimrod, stemming all the way back to the Tower of Babel. That's why in the book of Revelations, it doesn't say Egypt, the mother of harlots, or Rome or Greece, the mother of harlots. It says Babylon, the mother of all harlots. Because everything started in Babylon with Nimrod and the Freemasons there, who used the sacred sciences, the 7 sciences, and the illicit knowledge from the fallen angels from Genesis 6, and created this edifice. Now, he wanted to do more than just build a tower and kill God. He had to find a way to get up into heaven to do that. And that's why God came down and scattered them. In another video, we're going to talk about what they were trying to do. That's all I have for you guys today. I love you guys. Stay tuned. May God continue to bless you and your family.